The Handkerchief by Great 78.
Chapter 58. Partying, Prowling, Prying. Saturday at lunch, Draco was surprised to see Hermione in high spirits. Draco watched closely as she spoke happily with the recently traitorous Parvati in lavender. The weasel looked especially aggrieved, Draco was pleased to see. What was she up to? Blaise, mate. Draco tugged on the sleeve next to him, whispering quietly. He cast a muffling charm around them. Can you do me a favor? Can you tell me exactly what Hermione is thinking about? You're asking me to spy on your witch? What's wrong with you? It just seems like something is up. I'm only curious. Why don't you just ask her? We're taking a break from each other. Blaise whistled softly. I take it that wasn't exactly mutual. What makes you say that? Well, you both looked like shit for the last week or so. Draco smiled. I just thought, with all the other stuff going on, with what I've been asked to do, and then our fathers. Hermione left the great hall, and Draco slumped in his seat. But you're the same person that you were before the escape, and your feelings didn't change. I get that she doesn't know about the mark, or whatever you're supposed to be doing, but she knows you're keeping things from her, and she's accepted that that's not your choice. So why break up with her now? It was kind of a spur-of-the-moment idea. I was just thinking in my head of all these worst-case scenarios, and I panicked and thought she would be better off without me dragging her down. He lowered his head. I've changed my mind, but I can't tell her in a note. I want to do it face to face, but every time I've gotten close to her, she rushes away like she's got somewhere else to be. If it's any consolation, she still loves you, Drake. You got that from her thoughts? No, mate. I can see it in her face. Draco spent the rest of Saturday afternoon in the library, determined to find the correct verbiage for the passageway spell. But nothing seemed likely. The afternoon dragged on. He should have spent time in the room of requirement, working on the cabinet, but he could not bring himself to do so. Perhaps he would do it whilst everyone else was at the Slug Club Christmas party. Blaise had already asked a 7th-year girl named Coraline to go, so Draco wasn't able to go as his +1. Apparently, Coraline had a huge crush on Anthony Goldstein and was hoping to get him alone at the party. Theo was also going as a guest of Tracy Davis. Greg and Vince had detentions assigned by Snape for easily the 6th time this term and could not stand guard for him, but he felt like Saturday night might be safe to go it alone. Draco knew that the party was set to begin around the same time as the regular dinner hour in the Great Hall, and he wondered who Hermione ended up choosing as her date. He thought it would be Potter, but Blaise had ensured that the Specky Git would be bringing Luna. Perhaps she'd bring Longbottom, Draco mused, as he made his way up the staircase from the dungeons. The entrance hall was filled with partygoers in various colourful holiday dresses and robes. He caught sight of Luna wearing an audacious, sparkling silver dress, and exchanged amused glances with Theo at the sight. Then the crowd shifted and parted slightly, revealing Hermione. It was Yule Ball, all over again. Her hair was swept back, and then over one shoulder. A single peacock feather pinned to the curls. Her dress was tight at the top, and cut lower than any other muggle clothing he'd ever seen her wear. The skirt flounced out at the hem, which stopped a few inches above her knee. A sheer stole wrapped around her shoulders and rested in the crooks of her arms. Her kitten-heeled shoes had sparkling crystals on each toe. The entire outfit was emerald green. Draco stared, breathless at her beauty. It was like Yule Ball all over again. Yes, but devastatingly worse, because now he had seen her, had known her, had tasted her, and he knew exactly what he was missing. She turned and found herself looking right at him. She gasped, reflexively drawing a hand to her chest in surprise at the sight of him. He lifted his hand and touched his chest, where she knew he kept his handkerchief. She pursed her lips, then seemed to find her resolve. She touched her wrist briefly, but no handkerchief was there. The outfit had no sleeves for her to carry it in, but Draco took the gesture as a step in the right direction. Cormac McLaggen stepped in front of her, blocking Draco's view. A moment later, he turned, and Hermione had her left hand tucked into the crook of his elbow, smiling up at him. It took everything Draco had in him not to hex the boy on the spot. Fuck dinner. Fuck this dumb party. Fuck all of this. He turned back to the dungeons, greeted in the common room by Ivanovich and Harper, who were setting up for poker and fire whiskey. They invited him to join in, but he begged off. After 15 minutes of lying on his bed, feeling sorry for himself, having an imaginary dick-measuring contest with Cormac McLaggen and coming out the winner, and beating the wizard to a pulp for good measure, Draco returned to the great hall and forced himself to eat something. Then he hurried up the stairs to the room of hidden things. It was quiet. Perhaps a bit too quiet. Where were the birds? He opened a few cabinets and boxes, turning over a basket here and there looking for them. They usually gathered around what he now thought of as his cabinet, but tonight he couldn't find them. He made a clicking sound with his mouth. A feeble chirp to his right drew him to a tall chest of drawers that somebody apparently thought might look better painted with orange and green stripes. The top drawer was open a crack. Opening the drawer more, he located their nest. But something was wrong. They looked tired, lethargic. "You need food," he said, both as a question and a statement. Why hadn't the room provided food? Then he remembered the exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfigurations, one that stated that food could not be conjured from nothing. Water could, however, so Draco found a large bowl with a chip near the top, filling it with water. "I'll be right back," he told them. Exiting the room, he paused. Where was he going, and what did birds eat, anyway? He was rooted to the spot with indecision, torn between the library to research ornithology and Hagrid's hut to ask advice, when August Filch rounded the corner, flapping his way towards Draco, jowls quivering in glee. "Students, out of bed!" he shouted at Draco. Draco tried to explain that he was a 6th year, and did not have to be in his common room until 11 o'clock, but Filch would have none of it. In desperation, Draco claimed that he was on his way to Slughorn's Christmas party, and was only just heading that way. "Well, by all means, let us go together, and see what the good professor says," Filch drawled with glee. Grabbing Draco's upper arm in a surprisingly strong pincer grip, Filch set off down the corridor, pushing Draco in front of him. They reached the party, and Draco flushed with embarrassment. Hermione, Cormac McLaggen, Blaise, Theo, even Potter, now had a front-row view to his immense shame and embarrassment. An uninvited guest trotted out upon the carpet for public flogging. Professor Slughorn was gracious enough, welcoming him despite his lack of invitation. "It's nothing. I did know your grandfather, after all," Professor Slughorn said generously. "He always spoke very highly of you, sir. Said you were the best potion-maker he'd ever known," said Draco to Professor Slughorn, who preened drunkenly under the praise. As Abraxas had seldom spoken to Draco directly, he felt that this statement was just as likely true as it was likely false. Draco was looking around, studiously avoiding Hermione's eye, knowing how downtrodden he likely looked. He had spent nearly every day either skulking in the library or languishing in the room of requirement. He had skipped meals, had tossed and turned more nights than not in the last week or so. He knew that the robes he wore were wrinkled from where he'd laid on his bed before dinner. In short, he looked nothing like the tall, curly-haired blonde wizard that she'd come with to the party. He resolved to find some crackers, or bit of fish for the birds and then leave as quickly as possible. "I'd like a word with you, Draco," said Professor Snape, suddenly at his side. "Follow me." Snape swished his way down the corridor, black robes billowing behind him. Draco swiped a few hors d'oeuvres from a passing tray carried by a house elf and followed at a short distance, feeling like a small child about to be punished. Professor Snape pushed open the door of the last classroom on the corridor, gesturing him inside and closing the door behind them. "I do not know what game you are playing at, Draco, but time is getting short. You know that the Dark Lord expects you to succeed. Failure is not an option. Yet so far that is all you have produced. What with that silly necklace trick? You cannot afford mistakes, Draco, because if you are expelled, I didn't have anything to do with it, all right?" Draco spat out, not meeting the professor's eyes. Syrup of hellebore, crushed valerian root, cracked moonstones. "I hope you are telling the truth, because it was both clumsy and foolish. Already you are suspected of having a hand in it." "Who suspects me?" "For the last time, I didn't do it, okay? That Bell girl must have had an enemy that no one knows about." Professor Snape looked him deeply in the eyes, and Draco felt the potions cupboard in his mind shift and rattle slightly. "Don't look at me like that. I know what you're doing. I'm not stupid, but it won't work. I can stop you." Draco brought forth images in his mind. Quidditch practices with Blaze and the team, swimming in the lake behind the manor, riding the Hogwarts Express with Vince and Greg, patrolling the school with the rest of the Inquisitorial squad. "Ah, Aunt Bellatrix has been teaching you occlumency, I see. What thoughts are you trying to conceal from your master, Draco?" Draco's axis tilted slightly. He had worked a bit more, refining and honing his occlumency on his own. Did Snape really think that Bellatrix had a hand in teaching him anything? He pushed sudden thoughts of her away, and solidified his walls again. And did Snape truly assume that because he had this awful mark upon his arm, that he considered Voldemort his master? Draco fought sudden sadness at the thought. He had always liked Snape, trusted him. That Snape thought he was so easily swayed, it hurt more than Draco wanted to admit to himself. "I'm not trying to conceal anything from him. I just don't want you butting in," he bit out at Snape. Professor Snape leaned in close to him. "So, that is why you have been avoiding me this term. You have feared my interference. You realize that, had anyone else failed to come to my office when I had told them repeatedly to be there, Draco, so put me in detention. Report me to Dumbledore." Draco watched for a reaction from his professor. With whom exactly did Snape's true allegiance lie? "You know perfectly well that I do not wish to do either of those things," Snape said quietly. "Well, you'd better stop telling me to come to your office, then." "Listen to me," said Professor Snape. "I am trying to help you. I swore to your mother I would protect you. I made the unbreakable vow, Draco." Draco sucked in a breath. Was this where his mother had gone that night? The night after he'd gotten this task from Voldemort. She had said she was going for help, going to find a way to get him out of this. Could it be true? But how? What kind of unbreakable vow had Snape made with his mother? Did his mother also make a vow? Had she promised her life in exchange for his protection? He had to get out of this room, get away from this wizard. He would carry out this mission, protect his mother, and keep everyone he loved safe. "Looks like you'll have to break it, then, because I don't need your protection. It's my job. He gave it to me, and I'm going to do it. I've got a plan, and it's going to work. It's just taking a bit longer than I thought it would." "What is your plan?" "It's none of your business. If you tell me what you are trying to do, I can assist you. I've got all the assistance I need. Thanks, I'm not alone. You were certainly alone tonight, which was foolish in the extreme, wandering the corridors without lookouts or backup. These are elemental mistakes. I would have had Crabbe and Goyle with me if you hadn't put them in detention. Keep your voice down. If your friends Crabbe and Goyle intend to pass their Defense Against the Dark Arts OWLs this time around, they will need to work a little harder than they are doing at present. What does it matter? Defense Against the Dark Arts. It's all just a joke, isn't it? An act. Like any of us need protecting against the dark arts. Certainly, defensive spells were not what Vince and Greg planned to use once they became members of Voldemort's army. It is an act that is crucial to success, Draco, snapped Snape. Where do you think I would have been all these years if I had not known how to act? Draco stared at Snape in disbelief. He was admitting, then, that his service to Dumbledore had all been an act. Or was it the other way around? Now listen to me, his professor continued. You are being incautious, wandering around at night, getting yourself caught. And if you are placing your reliance in assistants like Crabbe and Goyle... Draco bristled, thinking of all the help he'd gotten from all corners, inadvertent and otherwise. They're not the only ones. I've got other people on my side. Better people. Then why not confide in me, and I can help, Snape said. I know what you're up to. You want to steal my glory. Or turn me over to the Order, Draco thought. He still was unsure which. Snape was too much of an enigma. Snape lowered his face into his palms. Rubbing his eyes blearily for a moment, he said, You are speaking like a child. I quite understand that your father's capture and imprisonment has upset you, but... Draco threw up his hands and stormed from the room, clutching the napkin-wrapped hors d'oeuvres in his pocket. He had other things to take care of, creatures that needed him right now, better things to do than have a long discussion with Snape. It was like arguing with a shadow. Snape was too much of a mystery to pin down. The fact that he still believed that Draco was so enamored with Lucius, the way that he had been as a child, was laughable. The sheer intensity and quantity of Draco's worries these days far exceeded his concern for Lucius. He felt like a circus performer at the little circus in Bruges all those years ago. A man who levitated a series of thin sticks in the air, balancing plate after cup after dish after spoon on each of the stick's tips. With each new addition the audience gasped and whooped in amazement, at once both worried and hopeful that the entire collection would fall in a terrific clatter. Draco only hoped that he could shield everyone he loved from the fallout. Chapter 59. The New Year. The birds had perked back up when presented with a handful of hors d'oeuvres from Slughorn's party that Draco had been able to sneak to them. Back in his dormitory, he had called Dobby, explaining where to find the nest in the ugly chest of drawers. When Draco entered the room of hidden things the next morning, the birds were back in full force, twittering and swooping overhead as though nothing were amiss. Draco had stayed awake long after he'd returned to the dormitory, thinking. There was an unbreakable vow made, this much he knew. Generally speaking, an unbreakable vow was naturally imbued by a bond of secrecy. The terms of the vow were not able to be discussed outside of the company of the vow-takers and the bonder. It was just as well. Snape could keep his secrets, and Draco would keep his. One useful thing had come from the conversation the previous night, however. Snape had reminded him that time was getting short, and failure was not an option, as far as the Dark Lord was concerned. Draco knew that the necklace debacle had been a mistake, but he needed to move forward on his backup plan, just in case the vanishing cabinet could not be repaired. Recalling the conversation upon which he had eavesdropped between Potter and Hermione in the library, Draco removed the coin from his pocket that he used to communicate with Madame Rosmerta. "Mr. Borgin will be sending you a package containing a vial soon. The next time that Horace Slughorn enters your pub, you will give him a bottle of your finest Christmas mead. Suggest to him that he gives it to Dumbledore as a Christmas present. Before you seal the bottle, you will empty into it the vial of—" His mother was able to offer his regrets to their house guests that Draco was unable to come home for Christmas, owing to his status as prefect. She had only managed one flu call to him so far during the holiday break, and it was painfully short and rather devoid of cheerful holiday tidings. She reported that Lucius was able to stand and take a few steps unaided. His vocabulary had somewhat recovered, but not his voice. He spoke mostly in a low whisper these days, and still did not speak very much. But he was eating normally, and was using his cane to take slow laps around the garden, so Narcissa felt confident that he would recover completely soon. Draco could not be arsed to care. Bellatrix, Peter, Voldemort, and the snake still lived primarily at Malfoy Manor, though Bellatrix sometimes remembered that she had a manor and a husband of her own, and disappeared for a few days at a time to check in with Rodolphus. When Draco asked Narcissa about the unbreakable vow she'd made with Snape, she would only say that it had been important. Narcissa told him about the occasional dinners that Voldemort had instituted to bring together his various followers. The meals nearly always included the Carrow siblings, who sounded both stupid and horrid. Selwyn, Travers, Nott, Goyle, Yaxley, and Dolohov. Fenrir Greyback and Rodolphus and Rabistan Lestrange joined occasionally as well. Draco's teeth clenched at the mention of Dolohov. He did not know the wizard well, but he knew that he hated him. Narcissa asked about his friends, and he said that he'd be spending the holidays with Theo and Blaise. She had looked at him pointedly, nodding and raising an eyebrow as if to say, "Go on." He merely shook his head no, slightly, leaving it at that. Narcissa nodded curtly, as though she'd expected no different, but she had whispered to him, "It will be all right, my dragon. You will work things out." Christmas was rather bleak. He, Theo, and Blaise were the only Slytherins to stay behind at Hogwarts. A handful of other students from other houses had as well, but the vast majority had gone home to their families, as the populace was fearful of the situation with Voldemort, and preferred to keep their loved ones close. Blaise and Theo were at least in good spirits. Not having to spend the holidays with abusive parents would do that, Draco supposed. Apparently Professor Slughorn's party had been a success for Blaise and his date, as the date had left with Anthony Goldstein, and Luna had left with Blaise, once Potter ditched her. Theo was in a good mood because he'd received a box of muggle treats from Eliza, as the Owl Mail office in Hogsmeade was able to send and accept boxes to and from the Royal Mail. He had sent her a few of the more benign items from Honeydukes, and in return had received canisters of muggle crisps, wine gums, and various other sugary concoctions. He had told her that the stores near him did not sell those items, so she'd been glad to send them. She'd also included a few intimate photos of herself, which Theo had promptly hidden away in his trunk. He threatened to hex the bollocks off of anyone who tried to find them. Draco worked on the vanishing cabinet, focusing his attention on wand movements. He wasn't sure yet about the incantation, but felt confident that it would come to him. Christmas came and went with the usual crackers and succulent feasts. Draco took mild pleasure in the buttery-soft dragonhide gloves that his mother had given him. Blaise had gifted him a new game for his Game Boy that he seldom had a chance to play any more. Theo gave him a book entitled What Witches Want, that was both instructive and preposterous. Looking at some of the advice and descriptions within, Draco was intrigued and a bit apprehensive. Then he reminded himself that he had no witch with whom to try these wooing techniques. and he tossed the book in a drawer in his nightstand, in resignation. He had gone back and forth on whether or not to send her a gift. Finally, however, he decided to trust his gut and his heart. He chose a charm of gold with tiny amethyst flowers, a purple hyacinth. In Victorian flower language it meant, "I'm sorry. Please forgive me." Term was set to resume January 6th, and students began returning to the school on the 4th. He saw her in the entrance hall just before dinner on the evening of the 4th. She was radiant in the torchlight as always, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she looked at him, not with anger in her eyes, but neutrality. It was the best he could hope for under the circumstances. He touched his breast pocket, and after a moment's hesitation, she touched her cuff. Both the Slytherin and Gryffindor tables were sparsely populated. Hermione ate opposite Neville, who noticed the brief but meaningful glances between them. As the meal wound down, Hermione was the first of the two of them to leave. Neville ambled over to the Slytherin table, stopping near Draco's seat. "Seems like you've cocked things up big time, Malfoy," Neville offered by way of greeting. "Yes, I did," Draco sighed. "Not sure what I was thinking." "Doesn't look much like you were thinking." "There's just a lot to be going on with. I hate the thought of her being in the middle." "Do you really expect a witch like that to stay on the sidelines? She's Hermione Granger. She's always going to be in the middle of things. She petrified me at the age of 12, so that she could help save the Philosopher's Stone from you-know-who. Believe me, she's not just going to sit around and wait on you to get your shit together." "You're right." Draco huffed a long exhale. "When the hell did you get so smart, Longbottom?" "I've always been smart. It's like I told you back in first year, Malfoy. I'm worth 12 of you." The Gryffindor wizard gave him a half-smile and ambled out of the great hall. "He's right, you know," Theo said. "What, that he's worth 12 of me?" Draco scoffed lightly. Well, maybe that too. But no, I meant that she's not going to wait around whilst you dick about. You need to fix this. Sooner, rather than later." "Yeah, I know. I will." Theo turned seriously to him. "One last question, though. When did you become friends with Neville Longbottom?" He found her, where else, in the library. She was perusing the bookcases on charms, likely getting an early start on their spring term assignments. "Hi," he said uncertainly. Happy New Year." "To you as well." May I explain?" He kept his hands in his pockets of the trousers he wore, eyes on the floor. He was afraid if he took his hands out, he would reach out for her and scare her away. "Certainly." She had yet to look away from the bookcase. He leaned back on the wooden support of the case, facing her even as she stared at the books beside him. He cast his strongest Muffliato charm. "I thought I was doing it to protect you. You know my father has always had you in his sights, and I was afraid that I was making the target on you bigger by being with you. And now I realize that I can't protect you from afar, and that my father is less of a threat than Bellatrix or Voldemort, and that we're stronger together than we could ever be apart. You and I have come up with some amazing things over the years. This is proof right here," he said, touching his pocket where his handkerchief lay. "I have no doubt that there are difficult things ahead. You know there are things I can't The secrecy bond strangled his words. His hands reached for his throat before relaxing. "Can't say. But there is one thing, and it's a big one, that you need to know. I'm sorry to have kept it from you. I was so ashamed of it." At this, his voice broke and fast, hot tears sprang to his eyes, cascading down his cheeks, almost before he was aware of them. He batted them away quickly. They were getting in the way of what he needed to say, to show her. Before that, though, I need you to know how sorry I am. I realized my mistake immediately, and I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't do it in a note. I had to do it face to face. But I wouldn't let you get close to me, she added. I didn't try hard enough. I didn't think you would... Well, after you see, I don't know that you will accept me anymore. What are you talking about, Draco? I love you. It was her turn for tears. He reached out as if to wipe them away, but pulled back. You may not want me to touch you. You'll hate me. Draco, I can't hate... You will, Hermione, he insisted. I hate myself every time I look in the mirror. She reached for him then, taking his hands softly, holding them between her own. Will you tell me what is going on? Her copper eyes swam with her tears, her features blurring as his own tears welled in his eyes. He pulled his hands free, taking his left cuff and unbuttoning it with his right hand. She gasped nearly as soon as he touched the buttons. He rolled his sleeve up slowly, keeping his arm turned downward until the last. It had not seemed to matter. He kept his eyes on her face the entire time, and from the moment his fingers had unbuttoned the cuff, she seemed to know. Her tears came harder now, features crumpled in disbelief and hurt. No, no, Draco, oh no! She collapsed to the ground, hugging her body tightly as though trying to keep the intense magic inside of herself. She leaned against the bookcase, looking up at him. How? When? But the tongue-blocking secrecy curse prevented him from sharing any details. He touched his throat to indicate that to her. Then he sank down onto the balls of his feet next to her. Secrecy bond, she whispered. Was it that night? The night you had to go to his ancestral home? Yes, he whispered, fearful, afraid of what the bond might do to him just in revealing that small piece of information. But apparently the bond only prevented him from speaking about it, not from confirming others' correct questions about it. He breathed a sigh of relief as fresh tears fell from his eyes. Harry thought you might have had to do this, to take Lucius's place in the circle. I tried to tell him no, that you wouldn't have to do that you were too young. They took my mother the day before. I didn't know how to get her back without going there, he thought, but the bond would not let him say it. And I was so afraid that if I refused, they would torture me. My occlumency is good, but I was afraid that against the two of them, for an extended time under the Cruciatus curse, it would break, and they would be able to see you. Everything. His voice broke again on the last words. They both sat in silence for a quiet moment, each living their own personal anguish of the last several months. May I see it? She asked. He realized that with all of their discussion, he had not actually shown it to her, keeping it turned away from her the whole time. Hesitantly, he turned his arm upwards, showing it to her. The mark was black, deep within the skin, but the skin around it was still red, angry and inflamed. In places it looked as though his body had tried to heal it over, only to have the mark fight back and grow thicker. It looks as though your body is trying to reject it, she sniffled. Body, mind, soul. None of us wants it, he joked. He rolled the sleeve down carefully over the mark, still a bit tender, even 5 months later. She smiled piteously. He sank down next to her, back against the bookcases. I'm sorry, he said, for not showing you sooner. In the beginning, soon after, I was in denial about it. Could not believe everything that was happening. And then I was just so ashamed. I understand. His breath caught in his chest. You do? Yes, I know it wasn't your choice. You are not your father, Draco. Her voice was quavering but clear. Thank you. will you give me another chance?" he asked. They sat there for a moment, facing one another, eyes only inches apart. He leaned forward gently and brushed his lips to hers. She allowed the contact, leaning forward slightly herself, but then pulled back. I'm not saying no. I need a day or so to think it all through, okay?" "Take as long as you need. It's been 5 months and I'm still thinking it through, about everything that's happened since this summer. But I know your brain works faster than mine, so a day sounds about right." She snorted quickly with laughter, covering her mouth in embarrassment and causing him to laugh as well. "I've missed this so much, Mai. I've missed you," he said, his voice cracking on the last word. He hurriedly wiped at the tear attempting to fall on his cheek. She removed her hands from his and stood. He clambered to his feet after her. "I've missed you too, Draco," she said. Her copper eyes flashed brightly at his silver ones, and she turned to go. As he fell into bed that night, it occurred to him that it had been a holiday season with something to celebrate, after all. She knew one of the worst secrets he had, and she hadn't hexed him into oblivion as he'd expected. He lay awake, listening to Blaze turning the pages of a muggle magazine, whilst Theo played Draco's new game on the Game Boy. The lyrics to one of his and his mother's favourite Christmas carols came into his mind. "God rest ye, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay." Draco could only hope that that would hold true.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Handkerchief by Great 78.